Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if you are actually connecting with that chatbot you are talking to, or if it is just a really clever program? Well, this new research dives deep into that very question. We're talking about AI conversational agents, or CAS. Think of things like ChatGPT, virtual assistants, or those chatbots you might interact with for customer service. These things are everywhere now, right? And as we use them more, we start to treat them in ways we used to only treat other people. Studies are showing that we might even form bonds, trust them, and even feel a sense of attachment to them. But a huge part of this connection seems to come down to how authentic they feel. So, what does authentic even mean when we talk about an AI? That is the big question this research wanted to answer. Because here is the thing, scientists are using the word authenticity when talking about AI, but they don't all agree on what it means. And it gets even trickier because it is tied up with something called anthropomorphism, which is basically the human tendency to see human traits in non-human things. Like thinking your car is angry when it honks. When we talk about AI, this can mean a lot of different things, from an AI seeming to have feelings to it just acting in a way we interpret as real. This past research has been all over the place, with different studies defining and measuring authenticity in totally different ways, especially when it comes to how human-like the AI is. There hasn't been a good map of all these different ideas. That is where this super cool study comes in. It is a scoping review, which means they looked at a whole bunch of existing research to get a big picture view. Their main goal was to figure out how scientists are thinking about and measuring this perceived authenticity in AI conversational agents and how that relates to anthropomorphism. They wanted to see the different definitions, how they were tested, and how all these pieces fit together in research models. They asked three key questions. First, how is perceived authenticity defined and measured in AI CA research? Second, how are authenticity and anthropomorphism linked, both in theory and in practice? And third, how do these concepts, authenticity and anthropomorphism, show up in research models? Are they causes, effects, or something else? To answer these questions, the researchers did a thorough review of existing studies. They looked at a bunch of academic databases like Web of Science, Scopus, and PubMed. They didn't put any limits on the types of studies they included, as long as they were about users' perceptions of authenticity in AI CAS. This means they looked at everything from academic papers to studies with real people interacting with AI. They wanted to get the broadest possible understanding. They didn't exclude any context, any user group, or any type of AI CA. They were looking for studies that defined, operationalized, or examined perceived authenticity. They even included theoretical papers, because sometimes those big ideas lay the groundwork for everything else. So what did they find when they mapped out all this research? It turns out there's a lot of different ways people are thinking about authenticity in AI. Some studies define it really closely to the human concept of authenticity, focusing on things like self-awareness and acting in line with one's values. But you can see how that is tricky with an AI, right? It doesn't have values or self-awareness in the human sense. Other studies look at authenticity more as realness or not being fake. For example, one study mentioned looking at whether an AI chaos seemed to be pretending or faking its responses, or if it was just playing along to please the user. And that brings us to anthropomorphism again. This is a huge part of why there is so much variety in how authenticity is understood. Some research basically says AI authenticity is just about how human-like it is. If it acts like a person, it feels authentic. But others argue that AI authenticity shouldn't just be about being human-like. It could be about the AI developing and learning in its own unique way, or simply not feeling scripted. This is where it gets really interesting. Some researchers are pushing the idea that AI authenticity might be something different from human authenticity. For instance, one study mentioned that an AI could be seen as authentic if it's consistent with its own capabilities, even if those capabilities aren't human-like. Imagine an AI that is really good at organizing information. If it consistently does that well, and doesn't pretend to be human, that could be its form of authenticity. But even when researchers try to move beyond human likeness, they often end up using concepts that still lean towards human traits. For example, one study looked at social presence, using items like, "It makes me feel as if I was accompanied by a real human being." See how that still focuses on the human comparison. Then you have studies like CITES, which tries to define AI authenticity without directly relying on anthropomorphism. This study looked at self-alienation, how much the AI seems to be faking something, and external influence, how much it changes its behavior to please the user. In this view, an AI could be authentic if its actions match what users believe its capabilities are. So, if an AI can do X, and it acts like it can do X without overpromising or pretending to be something it is not, it could be seen as authentic, regardless of being human-like. However, the researchers also noted that it is not always clear what participants mean by faking or acting out, and whether those ideas still imply human-like things like intentions or wanting to be liked. This really highlights the core problem this review is tackling. There is just so much variation, and it is not just about definitions. The way these concepts are related in research models is also all over the map. In some studies, anthropomorphism is seen as something that leads to perceived authenticity. It is like the more human-like the AI is, the more authentic it feels. In other research, perceived humanness is just one of several things that contribute to authenticity. And then you have studies where authenticity and anthropomorphism are treated as separate factors that both influence how we interact with AI. One study even looked at authenticity as a moderator, meaning it changes the relationship between two other things, like how similar you feel to the AI and how human-like you think it is. This diverse landscape shows why a study like this, that maps it all out, is so important. So, why is all this important? The researchers point out that as AI becomes more integrated into our lives, we need to understand these concepts clearly. It is not just an academic exercise. There are real ethical questions involved when we start forming deep relationships with AI that might seem authentic. If we feel a strong connection to an AI that doesn't actually feel emotions or have genuine experiences in the way humans do, what does that mean for us? This scoping review aims to bring clarity to a messy but crucial area of research, helping us compare findings across different studies and paving the way for more consistent and rigorous research in the future. The main takeaway from this review is that there is no single, agreed-upon definition of authenticity when it comes to AI conversational agents. It is a concept that is still being figured out, and it is heavily influenced by how human-like we perceive the AI to be. Some researchers are pushing towards understanding AI authenticity as something potentially separate from human authenticity, focusing on reliability and consistency with its own nature. Others still see it as a human-like quality. This ambiguity, especially around anthropomorphism, is the central challenge. The relationship between authenticity and anthropomorphism is the key to understanding the differences in how authenticity is studied. When the research leans heavily on anthropomorphism, the definition of authenticity tends to be about human likeness. When researchers try to move away from anthropomorphism, the definition of authenticity starts to focus more on consistency, reliability, or the AI not being deceptive about its own capabilities. The way they are related in research models varies from one causing the other to them being independent factors or even authenticity moderating the effects of anthropomorphism. The study identified that authenticity and anthropomorphism can act as antecedents, meaning they cause other outcomes like trust or engagement. They can also be considered parallel constructs, both influencing outcomes independently, or in some cases, one can moderate the relationship between the other and an outcome. This shows how complex these relationships are and how different researchers are trying to map them onto user experiences with AI. Now, for my take on this research is like a much-needed map for a really confusing landscape. The fact that scientists are trying to define authenticity for AI shows how much these technologies are starting to blur the lines between human and machine interaction. The biggest strength here is the comprehensive nature of the scoping review. By pulling together so many different studies, it really highlights the lack of consensus and the areas where more research is desperately needed. The biggest limitation, and this is acknowledged by the researchers themselves, is exactly that, the inconsistency. Because there isn't a clear definition, it is hard to compare findings or build on previous work in a solid way. It is like everyone is building with slightly different sized Lego bricks. Also, a lot of this research relies on user perceptions, which can be subjective. What one person finds authentic, another might not. What does this mean for us in the real world? It means when you are chatting with an AI, that feeling of connection or that sense of realness is a complex interplay of how the AI is designed and how your own brain is wired to see human-like traits. As AI gets more sophisticated, understanding if it is truly authentic or just really good at seeming authentic becomes more important. It might impact how much we trust AI, how much we rely on it, and even how it affects our relationships with other people. Future research could really benefit from trying to establish some clearer, perhaps context-specific definitions of AI authenticity. Maybe authenticity in a chatbot designed for therapy is different from authenticity in a customer service bot. Exploring the ethical implications more deeply is also crucial. How do we ensure users aren't being misled by AI that presents itself as more sentient or emotionally capable than it actually is? This review is a fantastic starting point, and I am excited to see where this research goes next. That's it for this episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a like, leave a comment with your thoughts on AI authenticity, and subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology behind our modern world. See you next time!